My name is Carolyn. For most of my life, I believed I was living an ordinary, comfortable existence. A loving husband. A quiet suburban home. A routine that made sense, simple, structured, and safe. But sometimes safety is just another word for silence. And silence can hide everything you don't want to see. Mark, my husband, was a dependable man. An investment consultant whose life revolved around spreadsheets, meetings, and never-ending travel. He was calm, composed. Almost too composed. Our marriage was a predictable rhythm. Morning coffee, polite kisses, separate routines. We didn't argue, but we also didn't connect. We looked like the perfect couple from the outside. But inside that picture-perfect house, conversations had thinned to calendar reminders. Touch had become duty. And LuvReal still lived, there was quiet and cold. 2 years ago, the Johnsons moved in next door. A nice family, friendly, normal. Their son Ethan was 20, helpful, kind, and always ready to lend a hand. He was just the neighbor kid. Until he WASN single quotes, it started innocently. One afternoon, Mark called to say he had a last-minute flight to Chicago. Another weekend alone. I was out on the porch watering plants when Ethan strolled by. "Need any help, Mrs. Daniels?" He asked, smiling. I laughed. "I think I can handle a few flowers." He grinned. "Well, if you ever need anything, I'm around." That brief moment, so small, so simple, sparked something unexpected. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Not as someone's wife, not as the woman who kept the house running. Just Carolyn. Over the next few weeks, Ethan's small gestures became routine. A quick hello, a shared joke. Helping me lift a heavy box, I told myself it was nothing. But each interaction filled a space I didn't realize had been empty. Mark, as usual, never noticed. He was glued to conference calls, glued to his phone, glued to everything but me. He stopped asking how I was. He stopped looking at me. He was either distracted or gone physically, emotionally, or both. Then, one Saturday while Mark was away again, I was struggling with boxes in the garage. Ethan noticed. He came over, effortlessly lifted them for me, and then sat on the steps. We talked for hours about life, about dreams, about things I hadn't said out loud in years. That afternoon, I remembered what it felt like to be listened to. Really listened to. I knew something had shifted. What followed wasn't planned. We didn't cross any lines at first, but the closeness grew. Ethan would check in, help with chores, sit with me on the porch while the world slowed down. And I looked forward to it more than I should have. Meanwhile, Mark grew colder. He came home later, traveled more, started guarding his phone like a lifeline. And even when he was home, he wasn't really there. One night, I caught him smiling at a text he tried to hide. He brushed it off. But that was the moment I stopped making excuses for him. The final blow came unexpectedly. He left for work one morning and forgot his second phone. A phone I didn't even know existed. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Messages lit up the screen, dozens of them. From a woman named Sophie, flirtatious, intimate. Mentions of hotel rooms, dinners, trips. Every word sliced through me. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was calculated. He had built a life outside our marriage, while I held ours together alone. I sat on the bed numb. Years of loyalty, of sacrifice, of quiet, constant effort, reduced to lies on a burner phone. That evening, I was still in a daze when Ethan came by. He noticed immediately. "Carolyn, are you okay?" And under the soft porch light, I broke. Tears poured out. Words I'd never said spilled from my mouth about the affair, the loneliness, the ache of being invisible in my own home. Ethan didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix it. He just listened. And for once, that was enough. This isn't a love story. Not the kind you think. This is the story of a woman who realized that silence is not peace. That loyalty without respect is just submission. And that sometimes being noticed really sin can awaken something you thought was gone forever. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this. I'm done living for someone who doesn't look back. Silently, his expression filled with genuine concern. You don't deserve it. He said softly, you've done everything for him. For the first time I saw the depth of his feelings for me. His words weren't just out of sympathy. Carried something deeper. I saw in his eyes the respect, admiration, and care I had longed for. In that moment, something shifted between us. We crossed a line emotionally, one that could never be undone. The days that followed were filled with secret conversations and emotional support. Ethan became my confidant, my refuge. The guilt of my growing attachment to him was overshadowed by Mark's ongoing betrayal. The hypocrisy was not lost on me, but my need for connection overpowered my conscience. But I was not naive. I knew this situation couldn't continue without consequences. I needed to decide what to do: confront Mark, expose his affair, or quietly endure, pretending for the sake of stability. My mind was a battlefield. It was then thought. A thought started to take root, a different kind of solution. One thought will not only confront Mark, but make him feel the full weight of his betrayal. A plan that would turn his deception against him without compromising my dignity or losing myself as completely. A plan that would require careful timing, patience, and a bit of subtle revenge. And so, the first seed of my revenge was planted. The days that followed were a blur of emotions: anger, hurt, confusion, but also an unexpected clarity. For the first time in years, I stopped feeling powerless. Mark's betrayal had freed me from the chains of guilt that had held him for so long. My relationship with Ethan continued to grow stronger, not in a physical sense, but emotionally. He became my anchor in the storm, the only person I could trust completely. I knew I couldn't simply confront Mark. That would give him that chance to spin lies, to manipulate the situation, to turn it all around on me. I wanted justice, not just for me, but for the years he stole from my life. It needed a plan that was both clever and irreversible. The first step was to gather evidence. I wasn't naive enough to believe that mere accusations would be now. Men like Mark were skilled at weaving narratives to suit their imagination. His arrogance was also his weakness. He had grown so confident in his deception that he barely hid it anymore. While Mark was at work, I began searching through his home office. Hidden in his desk drawer, I found a second credit card statement under a different name. Charges for expensive dinners, hotel stays, and luxury gifts filled the pages. The debts lined up perfectly with his business trips. My hands trembled as I took photos of everything. His infidelity was no longer a suspicion, it was documented. Rufy also installed a simple app on his account phone, one that automatically backed up his messages and call logs, tummy private emails. The text between him and Sophia Conjun to pour in their conversations were filled with intimate plans for the future, as if I didn't even exist. They spoke of starting a life together once things were settled. The audacity in Rajudin. He wasn't just cheating, he was preparing to discard me like I was nothing. But what he didn't realize was that I was already 3 steps ahead. The second step was to control the narrative. Mark was well respected in our community, regarded by his colleagues, sated by neighbors, even involved in legal charity events. His reputation was his most valuable currency, and that was where his greatest vulnerability lay. Started attending more social events alone. I reconnected with old friends volunteered at local events and slowly made sure people noticed that I was the supportive wife, holding our home together while Mark was always working. People began to ask questions. Mark's working late again. They would see a trace of curiosity in their voices. I would smile politely and answer, yes, Basinus has been so demanding lately. I know he's doing it all for us. With each interaction, I was planting seeds of doubt in the minds of our peers. I wanted people to start noticing the cracks in the perfect image Mark worked us so hard to maintain. Meanwhile, Ethan remained my silent partner. He never pushed, never crossed a Danny lines. He offered advice, comfort, and support. His maturity and understandingly deepened my trust in him. He became a sounding board as I fine-tuned my plan. Came step 3, legal preparation. Equally hired a divorce attorney, one who specialized in high asset separations. It presented the evidence I had collected: bank statements, the hotel receipts, text messages, all of it. Meticulously organized, my attorney was impressed with this amount of proof. You'll have Thoiper hand in court, she assured me. We can pursue not only divorce, but also financial compensation for marital misconduct. Learned that in our state, Mark's infidelity and financialis penilis could work heavily in me favor. The house, his retirement accounts, even his business assets, all potentially negotiable. Every piece of evidence was another brick in the fortress building, but I wasn't finished. The final part of my plan was most delicate: exposing him without aver. Directly confronting him one afternoon, I arranged for a private investigator to deliver an anonymous unveil to Sophie's workplace inside, where copies of the messages between her and Mark, as well as his financial promise to her, promises that clearly showed he had been lying to her as well. I knew Sophie worked for a company that held strong policies against unethical behavior, especially in relationships with married individuals. Her job was now at risk. A few days later, I sent another envelope, this one to Mark's firm. It contained evidence of his misuse of company funds for personal trips and gifts. As an investment consultant, his ethical standing was critical. The demagogue, his reputation would be catastrophic if the firm chose to investigate further. Still, I remained silent at home, playing me role as the oblivious wife. Mark continued his charade, unaware that rules were closing in. The first signs of this unraveling appeared sooner than I expected. Mark came home one evening, visibly agitated. He barely touched his dinner, pacing around the living room while pretending to check emails. Is everything all right? I asked innocently. Just work stuff, stressful week, he muttered, avoiding eye contact, but his phone calls grew more frequent and frantic. I overheard him arguing with Simeon, likely Sophie. Their affair was crumbling under the weight of my silent assault. A week later, Mark's firm launched an internal audit. He claimed it was routine, but I knew better. His nervous energy became impossible to hide. He grew short-tempered, snapping over minor issues. The man who once carried himself with arrogance now looked haunted and still. I waited as Sophie stopped coming around. I waited as Mark's company began asking uncomfortably cases. I waited as his world slowly collapsed. But my most important move was still to come. It was time for the confrontation, not with shouting, not with halger, but with cold, calculated precision. One evening, after dinner, I handed Mark a folder. He looked at it, confused. What's this? He asked. Open it, I said softly as he flipped through the documents. His face drained of color, his hands trembled. He saw the evidence laid bare. The photos, the receipts, the texts, the bank statements. Caroline, I can explain. There's nothing left to explain, interrupted calmly. Know everything, Mark, every hotel room, every dinner, every lie. I know about Sophie. I know about the money you've been spending behind my back, and I know about the investigation your company is now conducting. He sat down heavily, his mouth opening and closing as he searched for words that wouldn't come. Already spoken to my lawyer, I continued. We'll be filing for divorce. You'll be hearing from them soon. The silence was deafening. Mark's entire world, his job, his affair, his reputation was disintegrating before his eyes. I stood there, composed and in control. He finally whispered, Carolina, pleasant, do this. But there was no more repity left in me. You did this. I replied coldly. You destroyed our marriage the moment you chose to betray me. And with that, I stood up and walked away, leaving him alone with the wreckage he had created. But my revenge wasn't finished. Yet the best was still to come. After that night, Mark's downfall accelerated quickly. His firm suspended in pending investigation. Sophie, once so eager to build a future with him, disappeared completely when she realized it was no longer the stable, successful man she thought his carefully built life was crumbling piece by piece, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Divorce proceedings moved swiftly, my attorney armed with a mountain of evidence. I had collected secured near everything in the settlement. The house, a large portion of his retirement accounts, and even part of his business holdings. Mark was left with a fraction of his former wealth and the heavy burden of legal fees and professional disgrace. Throughout it all, I remained composed, refused to stoop to anger or public spectacle. My revenge was never about screaming or fighting. It was about taking back control, about making sure he felt the full consequences of his choices. In the weeks that followed, Mark moved out. The house felt different. Without him, but not empty for the first time in years. It felt peaceful. I spent more time tending the garden, walking through the quiet rooms, and slowly reclaiming the life I had lost long before his affair began. Ethan remained in my life, but with great care and patience. He respected my space, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. Our bond had grown from emotional support into a genuine friendship built on trust. In time, something deeper began to blossom between us, not rushed, not reckless, but steady and sincere. One afternoon, as we sat on the back porch watching the sunset, Ethan turned to me. "You're stronger than anyone I've ever known," he said softly. "You didn't deserve what happened, but you handled it with so much grace." I smiled, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "Thank you, Ethan. I don't know how I would have survived all of this without your support." "Don't need me to survive, Carolyn Hest. You're strong on your own, but I'll always be here if you want me." In that moment, I realized that while Mark's betrayal had broken my marriage, hadn't broken me. I had rebuilt my life piece by piece. Not as a victim, but as a woman who refused to be defeated. Ethan didn't save me, I saved myself, but having him beside me was a gift I never expected. As time moved on, I find a likeless that painful chapter, the betrayal flies, the heartbreak. They no longer controlled me. I had my freedom, my dignity, and a future that was finally mine to shape, and that was the great revenge of all. Thanks for listening. Bye.